The story today is so haunting, it refuses to let go, unfolding amid a wind-scoured frontier where ashes still whisper and shadows stretch too long. This is a place where broken lives cross paths with unfinished justice, where the past never truly stays buried. It begins with a man riding back into a town that already buried him, a small deliberate choice, powerful enough to wake a ghost and set fear trembling once more. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The wind rolled across the open flats with a hollow grieving sound, pushing dry sand over the remains of long-dead hopes. The sun sank behind the rust-colored bluffs, spilling out its last light and stretching shadows thin across what had once been a living place. Now there was only broken timber, a fallen windmill, and the faint, bitter trace of old gunfire soaked into the dirt. A lone rider cut through that stillness, his outline caught in the amber haze of dusk, every hoof strike echoing like a pulse in a land crowded with memories. Rourke Vance rode at an unhurried pace, his chestnut mare breathing out slow clouds of dust that drifted like smoke from dying embers. The brim of his hat hid eyes that hadn't known mercy in a long time. Those eyes had seen too much fire crawling across a home, screams swallowed by flame faces, erased before morning ever came. The horizon lay wide open ahead of him, but he wasn't riding toward it. He was riding after what had been taken. A silver locket rested against his chest, flashing faintly whenever the light struck it just right. It was worn smooth and dulled by years of use, but to him it carried the weight of a lifetime. Inside it, two faces smiled back. Smiles that once kept the world steady. His wife Eliza and their son Noah, they were the reason his hand had been sure and his voice had once been gentle. But light doesn't last where the ash talons circle. That night lived inside him like a brand. The sky had gone red long before the fire reached the ground. He'd been up on the ridge mending fence wire when the first shots tore the quiet apart. He ran with fire in his lungs, heart slamming as smoke poured up from the ranch. The ash talons came hard and drunk torches raised laughing as they turned the dark into an inferno. Rourke reached the porch too late. The door was already buckling, the roof shrieking under the heat. He remembered forcing his way through the blaze, the sharp stink of burning pine, and Eliza's hand on the floor still wrapped around Noah's toy horse. That smell never left him. Iron and smoke, grief and fury tangled together. Then came the gunshot. The world went dark. They left him there, certain he wouldn't rise again. One round in his side, another buried deeper where pride once lived. Death circled, but never claimed him. Coyotes cried through the night, and by the time dawn cooled the ashes, Rourke Vance was no longer just a man. He was something shaped by silence and hurt, driven by a heart that beat for retribution. Years slipped by after that. Word traveled that the ash talons had ridden south and taken Dry Creek, a small town, turned into a wide grave. Silas Grin ruled it with fear in his voice. The law wore his mark. Reverend Aldrich kept quiet, and the Dry Creek kin only spoke of freedom when the wind was loud enough to hide their words. Rourke's mare slowed as the first weathered buildings of Dry Creek came into view. The town sagged between two barren ridges, dust curling around it like smoke from a low fire. The church steeple leaned off, true the saloon sign hung crooked, and the windmill groaned steadily in the dry heat. It wasn't a town anymore, just a thing pretending to be one. A dog barked once, then fell silent. A woman watched from behind a curtain. A blacksmith froze mid-swing hammer, hovering as a stranger passed. With every hoof beat, the air pulled tighter. They'd seen riders come and go, but none like this. The way he sat his horse said he hadn't come for drink or trade. Rourke swung down near the trough, his boots striking hard-packed earth. The mare nickered softly when he stroked her neck. Silver spurs caught the fading light, whispering as he moved. He tied the reins and climbed the saloon steps boards, creaking beneath his weight. Inside, smoke and low talk clung to the stale air. Men bent over whiskey glasses, lifted their heads, hands stalling halfway to their holsters. The piano died on a broken note. A card slipped from a dealer's fingers. Behind the bar, an older woman with sharp eyes and a voice worn thin by years went still. Rourke set his hat on the counter, dust sliding from its brim. His voice came out rough and quiet, worn smooth by silence. "Whiskey?" She poured without a word, steady but slow. When she set the glass down, her hand shook. "You're a long way from any decent road," she said. He looked up. For the first time, their eyes met, and something in her expression eased. "You're Vance," she breathed. "Rourke Vance." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The room seemed to cool, as if his name carried weight all its own. "I thought you were dead," she said softer now. "So did they," Rourke replied. He drank. The whiskey burned, but not enough. Nothing ever burned the way it once had. Her name came back to him, then Hester Blythe. She'd lived beyond the next ridge years ago. A widow once known for warm bread and easy laughter. Now her face carried more dust than joy as she leaned closer. "You never should have ridden back here," Hester Blythe said under her breath. "Silas Grin owns this town now. He's bought the law and keeps killers close at hand. They've already spotted you. They'll finish what they started." Rourke Vance let his eyes drift to the mirror behind the bar, catching the uneasy reflections of men shifting in their seats. Maybe that's the point. Hester drew a long, steady breath. "They didn't just burn your ranch, Rourke. They burned the heart clean out of this place." He rolled the silver locket between his finger's thumb, tracing its worn edge. "Then maybe it's time somebody set a different kind of blaze." A chair scraped across the floor behind him. One of Silas Grin's men stood up, big, broad of face, emptied of decency years ago. "You sure talk bold for a man who's supposed to be dead." Rourke didn't turn right away. He set the empty glass on the bar and said almost politely, "Then maybe you're talking to a ghost." The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. His hand dropped toward his gun. Rourke was faster. No one saw the draw. They only heard it. A single report cracked through the room like thunder-clean sudden final. The outlaw hit the floor before he could curse, his revolver still halfway out of the holster. Everything froze. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Rourke slid the revolver home, as if it belonged there, one smooth motion earned through years of quiet practice. He turned back to Hester, his face calm as ice. Another whiskey. Her hands trembled, but she poured. No one moved until Rourke took the glass and headed for the door. Outside, the sun had bled away, leaving the sky bruised red as the first stars clawed through the dust. He paused on the boardwalk, listening to the wind sweep the empty street. Somewhere a door slammed, a dog barked once, and a church bell rang, a single tired note. He lifted the locket, studying the faces inside. "I'm here," he whispered. "You can rest soon." Then he tucked it back beneath his shirt, stepped down from the porch, and walked into the night. From windows and alleys, the Dry Creek kin watched, fearful, wide-eyed, but something sparked behind that fear. For the first time in years, the town felt something other than despair. As Rourke swung into the saddle, the wind rose, carrying dust and hushed voices along the street. Some swore it sounded like a name. Others said it sounded like a vow. Rourke Vance didn't look back. He rode into the dark, his shape fading past broken fences and dead grass toward a horizon that swallowed men and turned them into stories. And somewhere beyond lantern light, the ash talons would soon learn some ghosts don't rest until the living pay what they owe. The saloon settled into a wary quiet. Silence never stayed long in a place where fear slept beneath every table. Lamps burned low, throwing uneven light across warped boards and worn faces bent over whiskey. Outside, the wind combed the street, stirring dust like uneasy spirits. Inside, Rourke sat alone at a corner table, hat pulled low, eyes lost somewhere far off. Hester Blythe moved behind the bar, polishing a glass that didn't need it, her gaze sliding back to him again and again. She'd served men like him before, men hauling grief heavier than their guns. But Rourke carried his weight differently. His silence wasn't surrender, it was intent. And that unsettled people. At last, she set the cloth aside and crossed the room, her boots barely whispering on the floor. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. Her voice dropped to a hush. "Grin's men won't let it pass. The one you killed was their lookout." Rourke didn't lift his head. "Then they'll be watching harder." Hester sighed. "You think drawing Grin's eye helps this town? It doesn't. You're kicking a nest when we've got nowhere left to run." "I'm not here to run," Rourke said. His tone was even, but something cold sat beneath it, certain enough to stop her short. "Grin's taken enough from me," he went on. "From all of us." She sat across from him, lamplight, carving the tired lines in her face. "I knew your wife," she said quietly. "Eliza brought bread to my place every Sunday. She talked about you. Said you'd teach Noah to ride come spring." Her voice cracked. "When I heard what happened, I buried a loaf in the dirt and prayed God would pull the hunger out of this land." Rourke's hand tightened around his glass. He said nothing. The memory of Eliza's laughter, soft, wind-carried, rose like a ghost and faded just as fast. Hester leaned closer. "The sheriff won't lift a hand," Hester Blythe said. "Sheriff Morrow Pike takes Silas Grin's gold and his fear. And Reverend Aldrich hasn't preached a word since they burned his chapel down. Most of the farmers keep their heads low," she went on. "They're just trying not to bury another son." Rourke Vance met her gaze, his eyes dark and unmoving. "Then maybe it's time they raised them." Before she could answer, the saloon doors groaned open. A small figure slipped inside, no more than a boy coat hanging loose, boots mended with wire. He went straight to the bar, a bucket of water knocking against his leg. Hester frowned. "Jed Rowan. You're supposed to be at the stables." "Already done, ma'am," the boy said, setting the bucket down. "Horses are watered and fed." His eyes drifted to Rourke, bright with curiosity, like he was trying to see the man folks whispered about. Hester gave him a sharp look. "Go on now, before you wander into trouble that's grown-up sized." Jed hesitated. "Miss Blythe, is it true the man who rode in, he's the one they call the ghost?" Rourke lifted his head just enough. The boy stiffened under his stare but didn't step back. "I don't know who's been filling your ears," Rourke said. "They say a man's been hunting Grin hands," Jed answered. "Say he don't talk, just shows up then fades away like smoke. My pa said he stopped short, jaw tightening. My pa said men like that get sent by God to fix what the devil broke." Hester's voice softened. "Your pa was a good man, Jed. Don't go chasing stories." But Rourke studied the boy a moment longer. There was something raw in those eyes, grief still fresh, still bleeding. He knew it well. "What happened to your pa?" Jed's hands balled into fists. "Grin's men took him. Said he didn't pay his stable dues. They hung him from the windmill by the old mine. The room fell silent. Rourke's jaw tightened. "That mine's Grins now," Hester said, turning away. "The old iron pit north of town. He hides his men and his money there. Nobody goes near it." Rourke drained his glass, set it aside, and stood. "Then I know where I'm starting." Hester reached out and caught his wrist. "You can't take them all, Rourke. There's 20 of them, maybe more. You're one man." He looked at her hand, then back to her face. "One's enough when he's done being afraid." That night, Dry Creek slept uneasy. Wind slipped through the alleys, carrying a strange sound, soft measured like footsteps skirting the edge of a dream. One lantern flickered to life, then another as whispers moved from door to door. The canyon ghost, they said, back from the dead. Near the livery, Jed couldn't sleep. He wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and stepped outside, spotting Rourke in the shadows, saddling his horse. "You're going after them, ain't you?" Rourke glanced at him. "Go home." Jed shook his head. "You'll need someone who knows the trails. I've been out by the mine. I can show you where the guards sit." Rourke hesitated, the storm in his chest, flaring for a breath. "You shouldn't be out here." "Neither should you," Jed said. "But you are." A faint smile touched the corner of Rourke's mouth. "You're your father's son." He pressed a small pocket knife into the boy's palm. "If I don't come back, you keep that. Not for fighting, for staying alive." Then he melted into the dark. Over the next few days, the town felt at the shift. Grin's riders began turning up gone. One vanished off a bridge. Another was found tied to his own horse in the hills. No one saw it happen. No one heard the shots. But every morning, a black feather appeared pinned where a man had stood the night before. Hester heard the talk in shaking voices and half-swallowed whispers. "He's picking them off," she muttered, polishing glasses that were already clean. "He's drawn the devil's eye." And yet she noticed something else. Men started standing straighter. Women left lamps burning through the night, not from fear but hope. Even Reverend Aldrich opened his Bible again. The ghost was changing the air. 3 nights later, the wind turned mean. A storm gathered out on the flats, lightning stitching the horizon with thin lines of fire. Rourke Vance crouched near the old water tower at the edge of town, his coat swallowed by shadow. 2 of Silas Grin's men spilled out of the saloon, laughing and drunk, pistols hanging loose at their hips. They staggered along the dirt path toward the tower, one of them swinging a lantern that carved shaky arcs of light through the dark. Rourke waited. The storm crept closer, thunder rolling low like war drums. When the first drop of rain struck the dust, he moved. The lantern went first glass, bursting oil, splashing flame, dying in the dirt. The men whirled around, cursing, guns half drawn. One never saw what hit him. Rourke stepped out from behind the support beam and smashed the butt of his revolver into the man's jaw. He crumpled. The other fired once, the shot tearing wide. Rourke answered with a single round. The bullet chewed into the post behind the man, wood exploding into his eyes. A second shot followed, quiet, precise. The outlaw collapsed as the wind rattled the tower above them. Lightning flared, bleaching the scene in silver and shadow. Rourke reloaded, holstered, and was gone before the next thunderclap. When the rain finally broke, it scrubbed the blood into the earth like it had never been spilled. By morning, fear still clung to the town. In each dead man's shirt pocket lay a single black feather. Dawn dragged itself over the horizon like a worn-out promise, washing the desert in pale gold and smoked gray. For once, the wind fell silent, leaving the hush that comes just before trouble. Rourke rode slow through the open land dust, curling around his boots, his chestnut mare's hooves landing soft and steady. The trail stretched on, cutting through dry creek beds and cracked plains where even vultures were scarce. He rode without hurry, but with intent like a man tracking his own shadow. The land seemed to know him, whispering beneath the breath of the breeze. Cactus, tumbleweed, dead trees leaned the way he rode, as if the frontier itself bent toward judgment. The sun climbed behind him, catching the silver locket at his throat. He held it, one's thumb sliding over the smooth metal, then let it settle back against his chest. It felt heavier with every mile. For hours he said nothing, lost in the cadence of the ride, but echoes stirred deep inside, voices from another life. Orders barked in a hard tone. Boots on a jailhouse porch, the snap of cuffs in the dark. He had been that man once. Deputy U.S. Marshal Rourke Vance, a name that once carried weight, even pride. Back then, justice felt clean. Good on one side, bad on the other, a star pinned to the chest to mark the line. Then his world burned, and that star softened in the fire. He crawled from the ashes, half dead, the badge still clinging to him. By dawn, he buried it beside a river and walked away. He wasn't the law anymore. He wasn't anything. Just a ghost with a pulse and a purpose that refused to die. Heat shimmered along the horizon, and through the mirage rose the shape of a broken steeple. What remained of an old church stood crooked on a hill. Its bell tower was split, the roof half collapsed. Rourke reined in and dismounted, boots crunching over shards of stained glass buried in the dust. Inside, the air was cool and thick with silence. The wooden cross on the altar was scorched black. Below it, a Bible lay, open pages burned at the edges, but still readable words of mercy scarred by hate. Something stirred in the shadows. A figure straightened. A man in a frayed clerical coat, beard gone, gray eyes, hollow but gentle. "If you've come to confess," he said with a tired smile, "you're too late." Rourke's hand rested on his revolver by habit, then eased away. "I've made my peace," he said. The man chuckled softly. "No one ever does, son. We just learn how to live with it." He stepped closer, leaning on a wooden cane. "You're the one they whisper about, aren't you? The ghost riding on vengeance." Rourke didn't answer. He only tightened the strap on his saddlebag. "I know that look," Reverend Aldrich said. "Seen it on men right before they go to their grave. You think what you're doing is justice? But I've learned justice doesn't come from a gun. Only silence does." Rourke met his eyes, steady and unblinking. "Silence is all I've known." The Reverend studied him for a long moment, then reached beneath the altar. From a cloth-wrapped box, he drew out an old revolver, its barrel scarred but clean. "This was my boy's," he said quietly. He'd carried it once in service of the law and never returned from the Badlands. Now Reverend Aldrich offered it out grip first. "Maybe it'll do some good in another man's hand." Rourke Vance hesitated. "I'm not that angry anymore." The Reverend's eyes softened. "Maybe not, but God still sees the man behind the gun." The word struck something buried deep, half forgotten. Rourke took the cold steel, weighing it. It settled into his palm like a memory, strange yet familiar. He nodded once, holstered it, and turned for the door. Outside, the wind had come back, tugging at his coat, carrying the smell of rain. The Reverend's voice followed him out. "Vengeance doesn't put out the fire, son. It feeds it." Rourke paused with one boot in the dust. "Then I reckon I'll burn with it." He rode on. By noon, the land turned harsh again, flat, endless, stripped of mercy. Storm clouds piled in from the west, dark as bruises. Thunder rolled across the plains, and lightning clawed at the far edge of the sky. When Rourke spotted the fence line, he knew the place. Beyond it lay the graves, marked by small wooden crosses, bleached pale by sun and wind. His family's ground. The air here felt still untouched. He dismounted and knelt at the first marker. He brushed dust from the wood, tracing the carved name Eliza Vance. Beside it stood a smaller cross for Noah Vance. His throat tightened as the wind filled the silence he couldn't. "I kept writing," he whispered. "Didn't stop when I should have. I don't know if what I'm doing honors you or shames you." His voice broke rough as gravel. "But it's all I've got left." He drew the locket from his neck and opened it one last time. Their faces looked back untouched by years, untouched by fire. A single tear darkened the dirt. Slowly he dug into the earth and set the locket between the graves. He stood there as the thunder grew closer. When the first drops fell, he turned away. Shoulders squared, head bowed not in defeat, but goodbye. The storm chased him as he rode north toward the ridge. Lightning split the sky, revealing jagged hills ahead. Somewhere beyond them, hidden in the waste, lay the old iron mine, the Ash Talon's nest. Rain struck the ground like thrown nails. The horse leaned into the wind, but Rourke pressed on coat, snapping hard behind him. The storm wrapped tight, wild and watching, as if the desert itself had a will. Each flash of lightning showed the ghost he'd become, eyes hollow, face carved by shadow rain, cutting lines down his cheeks that could have been sweat or tears. By twilight, he reached the ridge. Below the mine spread out like an open wound, corrugated shacks, a fire pit, glowing red figures moving in and out of shadow. Silas Grin's men. A dozen, maybe more. The storm would cover him. Rourke led his horse to a rock outcrop and whispered, "Wait for me, girl." The mare snorted softly and settled against the wind. He crouched low, adjusting his gun belt. The old Colt weighed heavy on one side, the Reverend's revolver on the other, past and present judgment and damnation. He drew a breath. Lightning flared, and for an instant his reflection wavered in the puddles at his boots, half man, half shadow. Once he'd worn a badge. Now the storm itself marked him, the law of a wind, dust, and blood. Thunder broke like cannon fire, drowning the world but his heartbeat. He moved down the slope over slick stone and soaked sand. Rain lashed his face as he crossed the thin line between man and legend. Wind howled off the canyon walls, but his steps never faltered. Each one carried him closer to the fire below, closer to the men who'd taken everything and left him breathing. The storm roared through the canyon, hauling sand, rain, and the sharp bite of gunpowder. Lightning tore open the sky. It lit the mine's entrance like the mouth of hell. Rourke Vance stood in the shadows, drenched and silent, his hand steady on the revolver. Rain streamed down his face, mixing with dirt, his breath slow and even. Below, firelight danced around the camp. Shapes moved between shacks, grin hands with rifles slung loose, voices half lost to thunder. They didn't know what was coming. Rourke slid forward like smoke, weaving between rocks, boots sinking into wet sand. One guard turned a cigarette glowing at his lips. Rourke was already behind him. A soft click of metal, a muffled sound. The man folded. Another caught the motion and raised his rifle too late. The flash from Rourke Vance's Colt cut through the dark, and the storm swallowed the sound whole. By the time the rain slackened, two men lay sprawled in the dirt. Their torches guttered and died, one after another. Ahead, the mine's mouth yawned wide, and black, distant voices echoing from deep inside. Rourke stepped in and vanished into the dark. The air within was thick with dust and a faint tang of oil. Lanterns lined the tunnel walls, their flames shivering. Farther in, men laughed, grin hands, drinking, slapping cards, celebrating their hold on a dying town. Rourke drifted closer, boots silent on grit, the Colt warm in his palm. A shadow slid across the rock face. Rourke flattened himself to the wall, heart steady. 2 men passed, arguing over bounty money pistols hanging loose. He waited. One turned, caught a flicker in the dark, and that was enough. The shot thundered in the narrow tunnel. The second man reached for his gun, but Rourke was already moving hand, like lightning, the follow-up clean. Both bodies hit the ground almost together. The noise stirred the rest. Shouts rose, boots scraped, rifles clattered as they were worked. Rourke fell back toward the central shaft, where old mine carts formed a half-circle around an open fire pit. He crouched behind a cart, eyes locked on the flicker beyond the tunnel mouth. A shotgun roared, splinters burst inches from his head. He ducked and answered with 2 quick shots. Screams rang out. Metal clanged. Smoke and chaos filled the mine. He moved through it like a shade, seen only when it was too late. A man lunged from the side. Rourke caught his wrist, smashed him into the wall, stripped the weapon, and fired once. Another tried to flank him. Rourke rolled behind a cart, reloaded on instinct, and fired blind. The round found its mark. For a beat only, the fire crackled. Then a single shot snapped from above, sharp measured. The wind of it brushed Rourke's ear and buried itself in stone. A sniper. He looked up, caught the faint glint of a barrel on the catwalk. He shifted, waiting for the flash of the breath. Another sound cut through the storm. Smaller, faster. The sniper jerked back and pitched over the railing, hitting hard below. Rourke turned. At the far end of the tunnel, framed by dim light, stood Jed Rowan. The boy's face was streaked with mud and fear, both hands wrapped around a revolver too big for him. Jed Rourke breathed half disbelief. Jed ran forward, stumbling. "You said not to come, but I couldn't just wait." Rourke's eyes softened, the first time in years. "You shouldn't have risked it." Jed swallowed. "Pa wouldn't have wanted me hiding." Rourke nodded once. "You've got his grit." More boots thundered deeper in the mine, men regrouping, shouting to flank. Rourke waved Jed behind a barrel. Outside, the storm raged, lightning flashing through the tunnel mouth, lighting clouds of dust and gun smoke. What followed was bedlam. Gunfire burst in jagged runs. Sparks jumped from rock and iron. Rourke moved with hard precision, fire, reload, duck. Every shot counted, every step cut. Jed's hands shook as he fired once, twice, clipping a man in the leg. The outlaws screamed, fell, and didn't get back up. When the smoke thinned, only the wind spoke. Jed looked around, gasping. "Is it over?" "Not yet." Rourke said, his voice weighted, final. From the far end of the mine came a slow clap echoing. A tall, broad figure stepped into the firelight. His coat shone with gold trim and pride. His revolver gleamed. His smile was cold. "Well, I'll be damned," Silas Grin drawled. The ghost himself. Rourke stepped forward, gun low but ready. Lamplight carved his face into shadow. "Grin." Grin cocked his head. "You were meant to be dead, Vance. We buried your name, your badge, your family." He grinned. "Guess the desert don't keep corpses down." Rourke said nothing. He just studied the man who took everything and still stood smug for it. Grin's grin widened. "You rode all this way for what he spread his hands. Revenge. Closure." Silas Grin gave a dry laugh and shook his head. "You're a ghost hunting ghosts. There's no peace waiting for men like you." Rourke Vance's eyes went cold. "I'm not hunting ghosts." His voice stayed low, steady. "I'm giving them peace." The words settled heavy between them, thunder rolling overhead. as if the sky itself were listening. Grin's grin slipped. He spun his revolver once and brought it up. Then, let's see if the dead still know how to draw. They faced each other, two shapes cut from firelight, standing over dust and flame. Outside, the rain eased. The storm seemed to pause. Tassim stretched thin. Grin's finger twitched. Rourke moved first. The shots cracked like lightning. 1, 2, 3. Grin's staggered eyes blown wide. Blood spread across his chest, dark and sudden. He dropped to his knees, the gun sliding from his grip, disbelief frozen on his face. Rourke stepped closer, smoke curling from the barrel. He looked down at Grin as the man coughed, voice breaking. "You think they'll remember you as some kind of hero?" Rourke holstered the gun. "I don't care if they remember me, as long as they remember what justice sounds like." Grin tried to speak again, but nothing came. His head tipped back and the firelight danced in eyes already empty. The mine fell quiet. Rourke stood there a moment, the weight of years pressing into his shoulders. Then he turned, spotting Jed Rowan behind a support beam, shaking. "It's done," Rourke said softly. Jed stepped out, lowering his revolver. His voice cracked. "Is it really over?" Rourke glanced at Grin's body, then around the mine. A few of the Grin hands still breathed, wounded, beaten, broken. One of them, barely older than Jed, crawled backward with his hands raised, terror spilling from his eyes. Rourke drew his revolver, then stopped. He studied the boy for a long moment before sliding the gun away. "Right," he said. "Tell the world what happened here. Tell them justice still rides." The young man nodded wildly, scrambled up, and ran into the storm. Rourke let out a slow breath, his shoulders finally easing. Behind him, the fire hissed as rain poured through the broken roof, killing the flames, washing blood into the dirt. When they stepped outside, the night was already breaking, and dawn was coming. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.